Today I am with my mother, interviewing her aunt, Hilma Jacobson. Hilma, I'm going to start off with a question that I give everyone for a warm-up. Do you remember the old 1940s, 50s radio dramas?
I remember listening to Ma Perkins, because Ma would listen to it. I don't remember a lot about it, but it was on the radio. And I always listened to the Perry Como show. I'd run home from school, from New York school. It started at 4:30. And we had a radio right over there in the corner. And I'd scoot out of school as fast as I could to get here to listen to Perry Como because I liked his singing. And I'd sit, we had one of those old-fashioned cupboards that had, just a cupboard at the top, and then you could sit on the, what are they called? But anyway, I'd sit there, and it was half an hour show. Perry Como. Music.
What do you fear most for current and future generations?
I don't know what I fear most. I'm really concerned about, I don't know if it's a fear, but I'm concerned about children's lives. I think a lot of children have missed out on a lot of things that we had as children that were good. And I just think they just don't have the stability in their homes that I'd like to see them have. I'm thinking of a lot of kids that, that I've seen at school. They don't really know where they belong. It's funny, but I think the family has deteriorated.
Mm-hmm. I'm supposed to ask you about card playing with your sisters.
Yeah, we played a lot. Well, we played a lot of cards, not only with the sisters, but as a family. I can remember, during the winter, and we'd get Ma and we'd get Pa, and we'd play all day long when we probably should be doing work. But they liked it as much as we did. So it was just something we did as a family. We did a lot of different games. I remember, we played whist. And then when canasta was popular, we played canasta. And 500. And we played a lot of games, not only cards, but Chinese checkers and, that type of thing, board games. And I suppose because we didn't go a lot of places, as we were younger. We were here.
And do you still keep up the card playing tradition?
Oh, yeah. We do. Yeah, we meet, whenever we get together, we play cards. And then we try to meet in Boston, which is halfway between Madison and here. So we do that. It's crazy, but we just like it.
Good tradition to keep up.
Yeah.
Can you tell one of my favorite stories about the fireflies?
Yes, I should let you read that because that's written out. Well, this was a lady that lived down the road, Hazel. And they had a horse and buggy that they took to York. We came through York today. And it was the 4th of July. And it got late, she said. And they thought they should get home. But there was going to be fireworks later on at York. Well, they got to the top of this hill over here, just past the road. And they looked down in the slough, and all these fireflies were just lighting up like everything. And she said, well, we didn't really need to stay for the fireworks because we had it on our way home in the horse and buggy. It was neat. I'll show you that story. She's got it written out. Yeah.
What was it like going to school back then in York?
Well, there were 8 grades, 1st through 8. And in my class, there were 3 most of the time. So 3 or 4 in each class, I would say. And then we had just the one teacher, We never had any special teacher for art or music or anything. But we did have some teachers that were gifted, I think, in music. So they did a lot of music when we were there. And we had recess, and then a noon recess, and then an afternoon recess. And always played outside, you know. And for lunch, we a lot of times would bring, just a bag lunch with a sandwich. But for a while then, so to have something hot, they told us we could bring a little jar of corn or some vegetable. And then at school, we had a kitchen, so we'd put it in hot water to heat up the jar. And that was what we'd have for hot lunch. Yeah, I think a little later, they started bringing in hot lunches for kids, but it would have been really nice to have it. But we had just a very simple. I can remember this one gal that lived above York. Her dad always would buy boughten cookies, and some of them were those pink ones, marshmallow with pink frosting or coconut on top. And we were always envious of those boughten cookies because we never had boughten cookies. They were always homemade.
How did the teacher manage 8 grades?
Well, I think sometimes they would double up, like maybe third and fourth. You know, you could have the same class pretty much, or fifth and sixth, and first and second even. You know, so I think that's how they did it. And, you know, you'd always listen in on the other classes quite often. And so I don't remember if there was ever any discipline problem with anybody. There may have been, but I just don't remember that there was. I think on the whole, most kids were pretty well behaved.
I'm also supposed to ask you about roller skating upstairs at the farm.
Oh, up here. Yeah, well, I can take you upstairs. But this one room was just a big room. It wasn't divided off now like it is now. We played up there a lot and jumped rope. I remember jumping rope and, basketball, dribbling. And I can remember, like your dad and Donnie and some of them coming home after a ball game or something. We always had a calendar there. It was given out by the Pigeon Store, I think. And they'd a lot of times play darts. They had darts that they'd fire at that thing. I mean, there's holes all over that wall, I'm sure. And then we had a brown table in here, quite big. And it could be made quite big, too. But they played ping pong quite often after they come home. You know, and the folks slept right in there, but I never heard them complain about it. I think they were glad to have them home. You know, so it was pretty common to play. And we played up there a lot, upstairs, because it was just one big room.
What sort of things would you guys do for fun back in the high school days?
Well, we had, York had, you'd never believe it, but they had kind of a big building, and it had stage and things like for the community. They used to have a guy called Cousin Elmer, and he traveled around to different communities and put on shows. And we always liked that because it was funny and it was musical, and that's where he'd come, to that York Hall. They also did roller skating in that hall. And we were in 4-H when we grew up, so there were a lot of activities in 4-H. And they had community clubs. They would meet just like cards or have a program or speaker or something, and lunch, and the whole family would go, you know. And ball games in the summer. Just about every Sunday, I think, there was a ball game in the afternoon for people to go to, because your dad played in it. And during the winter, when we got in high school, they usually had a ball game on Friday night, and then we would stay in town in Hickston till the game, and then Bob would come and take us home. Well, he came to the game too. But we didn't have games all week like they do now, every night of the week. So,
Can you tell us a little bit about farming, how it was back then?
yeah, they had, we had cows, so that they milked the cows morning and night. We didn't ever have to milk cows, but we did, like in the winter, we would be the ones to bring in the wood for the stove to keep the fire going. And in the summer, when the oats would get ready, then they'd have a thrashing crew that would come. It would be all neighbors, and they'd take turns. So if they were here one day, then the next day they'd probably be at the next farm. But it was a big production because you had to provide food. They like to eat. So you'd make something for morning coffee, and you'd bring it out to them. And then at noon, they came in for a big meal. And usually some neighbor lady would come and help. They'd help each other get it ready. And then in the afternoon, you'd bring more coffee out to them, or cake, or whatever, sandwiches, and, So it would usually be, I would say, the 6-7 farms around. And they'd kind of take turns. They'd move from farm to farm. And then with haying, that was usually done just between families. But, see, this farm, and then up there was Grandpa's farm. And then over there was my uncle's farm. So they'd help each other out with that sort of thing.
Do you know why your family chose this area to live in?
I think because my grandpa and grandma were up there, and that was where he settled. And then when my folks were married, this farm was available, but it was in tough shape, let's put it that way, from what I've heard. So they bought this land. I would guess that's why they were here, My dad went to the college in Galesville, which isn't terribly far, but maybe in those days it was quite a distance, for just a short time. We never did know what he was thinking of probably going to do other than farming. But he had a sister that died unexpectedly at about age 9 or 10, and he was called back, and then he never went back to college. And so he ended up just farming. Whether or not that was what he would have chosen, I don't know. But I don't know. I always felt because Grandpa and Grandma were up there, we were kind of protected a little bit, because if something would have happened, I guess I thought more about this later in life than I did when I was young. But it was a place, you could go if your farm was during the Depression, if it would have been taken by the bank or whatever, which could have happened. And it happened to a lot of people.
Did the Depression affect you and your family?
Well, it affected, I think, your dad and Willard the most, because they were more aware of it. Yeah, and I think they realized that at one point it was probably a possibility that the farm would be taken. I mean, I've heard the stories so many times about that. Because I remember Mom talking about that nothing grew. It was the land, it was a drought, so crops didn't grow. I remember her telling about they had cattle, and there just wasn't enough hay or grain to feed them. And it had been told that there was going to be somebody coming into the South Beef River Church, which is between here and Osseo, with a big load of potatoes from Dakotas, I think. And that's not food for cattle, but farmers went there, and they loaded up their trucks or wagons with as many potatoes as they could, and that's what they had to feed their animals. So I think it was a very terrible time for people that were trying to survive. But, they had many people in the cities didn't have a place at all, so they had a home.
You live in a sort of unique area, being surrounded by Amish. Do you have any interesting encounters with them?
Well, I've had, just this last year, I had this Amish guy come. It was really strange because I was just reading here at night. It was about 8:30, and I saw this light outside, and I thought, what the heck, somebody's driving in. So I went to look, and I didn't see any car there. And then I saw it again. So I went to the door. Well, then I saw this Amish guy, because they wear the hats, And so I thought, well, I didn't see his buggy either, but he had come on his horse. And he left the horse up the top of the hill, I guess, because I never did see that. But anyway, he wondered. See, I had talked to another Amish man about maybe putting a window up in the top of the granary that was out, because I knew they didn't mind climbing. And I said, do you have anybody that I could, hire to do that? Oh, yeah, he thought so. Well, I never heard back from him. Well, he had talked to this Clemens. So Clemens said, well, I was just going by your house, so I thought I'd stop. That was 8:30 at night. Oh, gosh. Well, anyway, I said, well, there's no light up in the granary, so I don't think you can go up there. He wanted to measure it. He said, you have a tape. Well, I said, I have a tape, but there's no light up there. Oh, I've got a flashlight, he said. So he thought he could. So he scooted up there and used his flashlight and measured it. And I never heard back from him again, so I don't know. But I just thought it was strange that he was just passing by at 8:30 at night. I said, well, be careful on the road, So anyway, there. But I don't have any problem with them at all. They're nice people.
Do you still keep up any of the Norwegian family traditions?
Yeah. Well, I suppose the food would be probably a Norwegian tradition. We used to, at Christmas Eve, and I don't know why, but we had spare ribs and rice. And I don't think that's Norwegian. But we just did. And then at New Year's Eve, we had oyster stew. I think that's Norwegian. But, and then we had, other stuff that during the year, lefse and stuff like that.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Osseo Christmas gathering?
Yeah, Well, that started, I don't really know what year that started, but I think it started when it just got to be too many to go to one place, yeah. So we thought, well, we should get together, and that's how we ended up. Probably Evelyn found that place for us. I don't know.
I heard that you made a record once.
Well, when we were growing up, we did a lot of singing together, the four of us. And we sang like they'd have Luther Leagues, youth groups at church. So we quite often would sing there. And then we sang at community clubs because they wanted a program. And Grandma, up on the hill, she always, whenever we went up there, she'd say, let's sing, She wanted to have us sing. So she had us sing for her.
So would someone play a piano when you have a sing?
We sang pretty much a cappella,
Oh, okay.
the four of us. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
that's what she meant when you came. She said
Yeah.
she wanted you four girls to sing.
She wanted us, whether it was two or three or whoever was there, But the four of us, then we sang a lot together. I suppose mostly at church, but also at community clubs and 4-H, I'd say. And then when neighboring churches would hear that we did it or something, they'd think, well, we could call them and see if they'd come for the program. Or so, they wanted entertainment. So we did quite a lot of that. Then we made that record actually when we were out of college because Marion and Ron were going to be leaving for Montana. And we thought, well, it'd be fun to have a record. So we met in St. Paul because Ron was at the seminary and they had the machines that you could make a record. So we made it there. We sold about 300.
Do you still have any?
copies?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Do you want one?
yeah.
Yeah, you can have one. I've got some.
Have you ever had it digitized?
Huh?
Have you ever had it turned into like a CD?
Yeah. Yeah, we did. In fact, when I went to recycling, well, that was a couple of years ago, I suppose. In the garbage, there's one part for garbage and there's one part for recycling stuff. Here was our record. Somebody had brought it to throw it away.
Oh no, did you pick it up?
Yeah, I did. Well, people are buying record players now, so they're doing more of it.
I remember selling it door to door in White Bear as a kid.
Yeah. Well, it was quite an accomplishment for us.
Yeah.
And we did it all in one night. I mean, our voices were getting pretty hoarse, but it was a good thing to do.
What did you, I think I remember you telling some stories like tricks that you would do on Halloween as a kid.
Yeah, we were awful. Yeah, we did goofy tricks. I mean, I think now it would be called vandalism. Really, it was. We would go down to the York schoolhouse. That's when the school was running. They had a big chain-like mat where you wiped your feet before you went in. We took that thing and put it up the flagpole. I mean, it was just dumb stuff like that. We'd tip over outhouses. And then I remember one time we took a snow fence, and on top of the hill from the school, we thought, let's just unroll this snow fence right across the road. I mean, we could have caused accidents and everything. So we did some crazy things. I mean, I don't know. I don't think the folks even realized we were doing it. We just start out and do it.
Was it trick-or-treating?
We did do some trick-or-treating. We went down to York, and they used to have a little grocery store. And we didn't even wait for a treat. We just did tricks. We'd holler tricks or treats, and then we'd throw some weeds in the door. I mean, it was just crazy. I don't know. I think now kids would be, I don't know what they'd call them.
Can you talk a little bit about what you remember during the World War II era?
Yeah, I remember we used to have that big tree down by the windmill. We climbed a lot. And we'd climb up there, and then we'd pretend that we saw your dad. We'd say, well, the Japs will soon surrender because Eldon's over there, and he'll make sure that that we win the war. I mean, just fooling around and playing. And then I remember Pa coming in, I think, every day from being outside. And the mail used to come about 9:30. And I can just remember him saying, "Did you hear from the boys today?" Every day. It was, because Ma wrote to them every day, both of them. And that was your communication, was a letter now and then. And so he'd always say, "Did you hear from the boys today?" So it was always on their mind, I think. And then I remember when your dad came home, we had that dog Bingo. And I can still see that car come down. I think he had picked him up in La Crosse, probably. And when Bingo saw Eldon, he just ran to him and jumped up on him. I mean, he knew him right away. And it had been a few years, a couple of years at least. So I remember some of those things. And I remember the letters coming, and then that flag was in the window, always in that window. It was supposed to be red, white, and blue, but it's faded.
Oh. So the number of stars are the number of
people that are serving.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then if they were killed in action, they had a gold star. It changed. Yeah, it was a terrible time. We didn't feel that. I was about 8, 9, yeah. So I didn't feel the fear that people felt, I don't think. That.
I remember a story about Grandma sending a coat over to England because they were.
Yeah.
Am I getting this right? And she put a letter in the.
They were asking for clothing, Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember her sending packages sometimes of, she'd make an angel food cake because she always thought that would keep pretty good. And then she'd pack around it with popcorn, around the box. And I'm sure it took weeks before they'd ever get it. And then I remember when we were, everybody was kind of involved in doing what they could to win. And one thing that we were encouraged to do as kids was to pick milkweed pods, the white part. And we'd have these bags, big, they were kind of like a gunny sack, I think, that you'd fill up with milkweed. And they were used for parachutes, to make parachutes. They're real silky. And yeah, in fact, they've been concerned now because there just aren't that many milkweed plants anymore. But then it was you'd see them all over. We picked a lot of them. And then they had what they called victory gardens. Everybody was supposed to build or have a victory garden. I suppose just to produce your own food so that you would. I remember asking your dad, how did you keep fed? I mean, how did you have food to eat? Well, they had those little canteens, and then they did have some food wagons that would try to follow the troops, but I'm sure it was pretty hard.
Did Willard and Dad?
They didn't talk a lot about it.
Did you ever really hear anything about what happened over there?
Well, once in a while, but on the whole, I would say they didn't care to talk about it. I'd hear people ask. I remember, this Johnny Rookstead lived in New York. He was a blacksmith, and he knew the family real well. But anyway, one time he made a comment to Willard. He said, "Well, you were pretty lucky because you were up in the air in an airplane, and you didn't have to worry about being shot at." And he said, "Well, it wasn't much fun," he said, "to see bullet holes in the wings and hope you could get back from your mission without crashing." And I remember hearing that, and I thought, you never think about it, And no, they really didn't talk a lot about it, but I remember your dad saying one time that when they were along the Rhine River in Germany, there were a lot of German troops right around. And he said many people had been killed, but he just pretended he was dead and just laid there still. So they would just think he was one of them. I mean, it's a terrible thing to think about, but it was a terrible time for. I've thought about them because, they lived here in this secluded little place. And then I think your dad was probably 18 when they were called up. Never had a gun. We never had any guns on the farm. Never had shot anything. And then to go into training and be gone, and then to go to a foreign country, and it must have been terrible. You got rations for each member of your family for, I think it was like sugar and coffee and shoes, and that's what you were allowed to get. And it was an advantage, I suppose, to be in a larger family because we had more rations. Yeah.
So you talk a little bit about what, you went to college, right?
Yeah, went to college.
At Eau Claire?
Yeah, in Eau Claire. Yeah, we, that was one thing that, we were lucky because we had parents that really valued education. And neither one of them had probably the opportunity to have it. But I can remember Mom saying, it's something that they can't take away from you. It's just something you'll always have. And I remember thinking, boy, it was tough going because there were 3 of us at one time in college. And I said, I remember thinking, coming home that first year, and I said, I could just get a waitress job for a while because it was tuition time. And no, Pa said, we'll sell another cow and pay for the tuition. It was just so matter of fact. We just knew that we were expected to go. And boy, I've been really grateful for that because it'd been easy not to. And I remember some of my high school friends, they said, how come you ended up going to college? Because they didn't. And I said, well, we just knew that that's what we were supposed to do. It was just expected. So that was a real gift.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
5 of each. 5 brothers and 5 sisters. Yeah, 10. Yeah.
Don't see that often much.
We were lucky. I mean,
So when you went to college, when 3 of you, did you live together with your sisters?
well, we stayed in the dorm. But I was in the same dorm as Alice was, and then Betty and I were in the same dorm too. In fact, we were staying in the same room together one year too. So,
Do you have any fond memories of those days in college? Is there anything?
well, we came home quite often on the weekend from Eau Claire because we didn't have a meal plan, so we would bring food back every Sunday night, and that was supposed to last for the week. And I remember Mom would make these rolls on the weekend for breakfast, and by Thursday they were pretty soggy. But we were lucky to be able to go.
So do you prefer country life to city life?
I like the country life, especially in the summer. I don't particularly care for it in the winter, but I don't. But I mean, it's not a big fact. It's as long as you can. I said as long as I can drive, I'm fine. But once you can't drive, there's no way you could live here, because you got to be able to maneuver a little bit.
What took you out to Sacramento? How old were you when?
I had taught 2 years, and then I went out there to teach.
Just for an adventure?
Yeah,
Oh.
kind of an
Did you go
adventure.
by yourself?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, it's a time to do it when you're young. Well, I really liked it out there, but I knew that when I went that I wasn't going to be there. It was just a thing to do for a while. And I didn't, I wouldn't want to be that far away.
So when did you come back to live here?
I did the year after Pa died.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because Jerome, the neighbor, was on the school board at the time, and his wife talked to me that summer, and she said, I don't know if you're interested in coming back, because I was concerned that I didn't think Ma could live here alone. And she said, and there's going to be a couple openings. Jerome had told her that. And she said, if you want to look into it. And I thought, well, maybe I should. So I looked into it, and then they offered me that one job. So I took it.
Was it hard to leave Madison?
No, not really. I mean, I liked it there and everything, but no, it wasn't. It just seemed the right thing to do.
How old were you then, would you say?
Well, 37, maybe. I think. Somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So as a child, did a lot of your holidays spend up at your grandparents' and up there?
Well, we usually were there for Christmas. Yeah, she was quite a woman, because her Christmas tree, I don't know if you ever heard about that, but she'd go up in the bluff and she'd just cut off a branch, and stick it in a can or something, and that was the Christmas tree. I mean, she was unique. And you had in the Sunday paper, the comics were always in color. That was her wrapping paper for her Christmas presents.
So was she very frugal?
She was very frugal, but I think she was ahead of everybody else. I mean, she just was sensible. Uh-huh. I mean, it was neat.
Was she fun?
Yeah, she was fun. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think she thought a thing of it. She'd wrap up whatever she could find up in the drawer, and that would be our Christmas present. Wrap it up in the comics. Yeah, she was. And she'd always make one box of Jell-O. Well, we just knew that one box of Jell-O was supposed to serve quite a few people. So you took one little teaspoonful. I mean, that was the way it was. Uh-huh. And when she made a pie, she'd use whatever she had. She might have a few apples. She might have a few blackberries. She might have a few raisins. She'd throw them all in there, and by hooky, it was pretty good. Yeah, she was ahead of her days as far as.
So did you speak Norwegian when you were little?
Well, very little. But I really think I can understand it because I heard a lot of it. I can understand Norwegian pretty good. But we didn't really speak it like your brother, like Willard and Eldon did. They started grade school in Norwegian. But
was the school Norwegian? They spoke Norwegian until they went to school?
I think it was I think the teacher actually taught in Norwegian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think that's what Ma said. But they spoke. See, Mood spoke only Norwegian.
Really?
Yeah, she didn't want to learn English.
Even when she came over when she was 18?
Or everybody around here talked Norwegian, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think most of them were immigrants. And so the conversation in the house with her was always Norwegian. But the folks spoke English, When Ma was talking to her, she'd talk in Norwegian.
Can you talk a little bit about the unique geography here, the coulees?
Yeah, a coulee. A coulee is actually a French word, but it has to do with the lay of the land, the valleys and the hills in this western part of the state, Wisconsin. Like the coulee just over here is called Skimmerhorn Coulee. That was the name of a man. I think I've taken you through May Coulee, and then over from May Coulee, there's Fall Coulee, and then there's Tuft Coulee, and let's see, what are some of the other coulees? Big Slough. And that was named because of a big, wide slough that runs right through that area. But it's a coulee.
Did you have horses when you were a kid?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a sleigh or anything?
We had a sleigh. Pod quite often took us to school in the winter on that sleigh.
Did it have bells?
I think they probably had some. Well, yeah, I've got a bell right down there. In fact.
Was it fun?
Yeah.
Was that fun?
Yeah, it was fun. But it was more fun to ride in a car.
Warmer.
Yeah, but we never rode horses or anything. They were work horses. Yeah. In fact, Pa would always be very careful about keeping us away from animals that could kick or step on us or whatever.
Did you have a lot of animals?
We had just the cows, chickens. For a while, we had some pigs, but not always. And a dog and cats.
What was the dog's name?
Bingo. That's the one that I remember the most. We did have one that was kind of a lassie type dog, but Bingo was the one that seemed to be here the longest.
What was one of the hardest things growing up?
Well, I think probably some of the deaths were the hardest things too. I wasn't very old. I was 7 when Dickie died. But I
And Dickie was your younger brother?
Yeah.
And he was how old?
A year. And you're protected when you're younger. But I can remember that it was a difficult time. Yeah, he was. Well, I'll have to show you a picture of him. We've got one picture.
Did he die suddenly?
Well, he died accidentally. See, with the stove, a lot of times the folks would use a little kerosene to start the fire in the morning, and it was in a can, I think, like a vegetable can or whatever. Well, he accidentally got a hold of it and swallowed some of it. And it got into his lungs, and they rushed him, to the doctor, but they couldn't save him.
Did he die that day?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it happened very fast then?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. But he wasn't here when he died.
He was at the hospital?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I can remember them coming home,
Your mom and dad?
Yeah. And, it was a terrible thing, But we were just a little younger, so you are protected somewhat. But we happened to have, I think it was chicken pox, so we didn't go to the funeral. But they have, it used to be the custom that they'd have people coming to the home for like a visitation. Now they go to the funeral home. So the body he was here, and people did come. I remember that. I think those were the hardest times. Yeah.
Do you remember your phone number?
Yep, I do. 3 long and a short.
So what is a long and a short?
I'll play it for you.
Okay. Oh, okay.
3 long and 1 short.
So then how did it sound if someone was calling you? Is that
That's what you'd hear.
So then you knew the call was for you.
Then you knew it was for you. Grandpa's was 1 long and 1 short.
So would that always be ringing then if people are calling each other all the time?
Well, it didn't ring a lot. I mean, there wasn't a lot of phone calls. But they usually listened in. if they heard it. Well, I mean, I think it was just so automatic. And then there was Nellie was the operator of the phone in Northfield. So she's the one that would relay the call. And if ever there was an emergency, like a fire or whatever, they'd ring 6 long rings, and then people were supposed to listen and see what it was, see if they could help. There was a neighbor over here that, when he got older, had gotten real confused, and Lester was his name, and he got wandering one night and didn't come home. And the family couldn't find him. So they had called the central office, and she dialed 6 rings, and then the neighbors all went out hunting.
Before we leave, I would like to play a song off the record Hilma recorded. I present to you We Lift Our Voices by the Jacobson Sisters.
We lift our voices, joy overflowing in bright melodious song, while youthful lives with pleasure are glowing, viewing our happy throng. Upward and onward our way